Wave. Hello?
March 2025. A private plane vanishes without a trace. And within hours, whispers start flooding the internet. Was Britain's Got Talent sensation Sydnie Christmas on board? As headlines hinted at heartbreak and rumors spiraled out of control, one thing became chillingly clear: something wasn't adding up. We begin tonight with a developing story that's left fans, investigators, and the entertainment industry reeling. A small aircraft, scheduled for a discreet charter flight, suddenly disappeared off radar. Initial reports were vague, flight logs were sealed, no official manifest was released. But within hours, a single name began circulating like wildfire: Sydnie Christmas. The breakout vocal powerhouse whose rise to fame had captivated millions. She was reportedly en route to a high-profile performance the very night the aircraft went missing. Sources close to the event claim she never arrived. Her team issued no comment. Her social media accounts went dark, and the silence deafening. The online world exploded. Fan pages, tabloid sites, even respected outlets began speculating. Some believed Sydnie was merely late. Others feared the worst. A few, though, suggested something deeper, something far more unsettling was unfolding behind the scenes. No confirmation, no denial, just a vacuum of information and a growing sense of dread. But to understand how this moment unraveled and why so many believe it was no accident, we need to go back to the beginning, to the rise of a star who seemed destined for something far greater or far darker. Before the rumors, before the headlines, before the eerie silence, Sydnie Christmas was simply a girl with a voice too powerful to ignore and a dream so big it once seemed impossible. Born in a quiet town far from the glittering lights of showbiz, Sydnie spent her early years not on red carpets, but in school halls and small community theaters. She sang in whispers, hummed in corners, and dreamed in silence. Family friends say she was shy, even withdrawn. But when she sang, everything changed. She auditioned again and again, sometimes traveling hours just for a chance to be heard. Most of the time, she was turned away. No callbacks, no feedback, just rejection, over and over. But Sydnie didn't quit. It was a single phone call that changed everything. One producer, one late-night message, and just like that, Sydnie was on a train bound for London, chasing a chance to audition for Britain's Got Talent. The odds were slim, the stakes, everything. Then came the moment the world heard her for the first time, a haunting rendition that left the judges speechless and the audience on its feet. Clips of that performance went viral within hours. By morning, she wasn't just another contestant, she was a phenomenon. Her career skyrocketed: interviews, endorsements, magazine covers, from nobody to household name in less than a year. But as one insider quietly remarked, she always looked like she was waiting for it to disappear. And maybe that's because she knew something we didn't. Coming up, even as her star rose, subtle signs began to surface. Ominous messages, late-night calls, and a strange feeling that something wasn't right. What was Sydnie sensing, and did she try to warn anyone before it was too late? Even at the height of her fame, those closest to Sydnie Christmas say something always felt off. She smiled on stage, she laughed in interviews, but behind the camera, friends recall quiet moments of unease, nights when she couldn't sleep, days when she'd stare into space, as if listening for something no one else could hear. Weeks before her final performance, Sydnie began confiding in select members of her inner circle. She spoke about feeling watched, about shadows that followed too closely. She joked, nervously, that her rise had come too fast to be safe. Most dismissed it as pre-show anxiety. After all, who wouldn't be nervous with the world watching? But the signs grew harder to ignore. A cryptic message reportedly arrived in the dead of night. No sender, no signature, just a single sentence. Don't trust the quiet. A scheduled meeting with a well-known celebrity was abruptly canceled after what sources describe as a disturbing coincidence. Details remain classified, but one associate claims Sydnie left the meeting visibly shaken and refused to discuss what had happened. Then came the private moments, captured on behind-the-scenes footage never meant for public release. A hand shaking before a performance, her eyes darting off camera during a backstage interview. One audio tech picked up what he described as a barely audible whisper, a voice, not hers, saying she shouldn't be here. The file was later deleted. In her final weeks, Sydnie's lyrics changed. Her voice, still strong, carried something else, a heaviness, a fear just beneath the surface. Next, the night of her most anticipated show. The crowd was ready. Her team had everything in place. But Sydnie? She made a choice no one expected, one that would set everything in motion. It was supposed to be a night of celebration, a defining moment in Sydnie Christmas's already meteoric career. The venue had sold out in under an hour. Fans flooded in from across the country, eager to witness what insiders promised would be her most unforgettable performance yet. The press was lined up outside. Paparazzi jostled for position. Even network executives were in attendance. Backstage, everything appeared to be going smoothly. Sydnie arrived early. She posed for photos. She laughed with her stylist. But something wasn't right. Members of her team, speaking only under anonymity, say she was unusually quiet in the dressing room. She kept glancing toward the mirror as though waiting for something or someone. Her hands trembled as she adjusted her microphone. One assistant overheard her mutter, "This doesn't feel real." And then, a moment that still haunts those who were there. Shortly before her final rehearsal, Sydnie turned to a close friend and whispered, "I feel like this is too good to last." At the time, they thought it was just nerves. In hindsight, it was a warning. The performance itself was flawless. Critics called it breathtaking, career-defining, haunting in its intensity. But once the final note faded and the crowd erupted, Sydnie was already gone. She left the venue without her team, without her security, without a word. The plan had been clear for weeks: a car to a nearby hotel, a brief press appearance, and then a helicopter to a private hangar. But Sydnie changed everything without telling anyone. Security logs confirm she exited through a side door alone, bypassing her waiting staff and vehicle. Her phone went dark minutes later. And what happened next has never been fully explained. Because that night, just hours after taking the stage, Sydnie Christmas disappeared. And the footage from that final departure raises more questions than it answers. Hours after Sydnie Christmas vanished from the spotlight, a single piece of footage surfaced, grainy, shaky, and barely a few seconds long. Captured by an anonymous bystander near the hangar where her plane was scheduled to depart, the clip shows Sydnie walking briskly toward a small private jet. She's flanked by two unidentified individuals, tall, silent, their faces partially obscured by caps and shadows. No one from her official team recognized them. Security footage from inside the hangar was conveniently unavailable due to what authorities labeled a system malfunction. But this single clip, leaked online and quickly removed from most platforms, was enough to set conspiracy theories ablaze. There's one moment in the video that continues to disturb experts. Just before boarding, Sydnie looks directly at the camera. Her expression changes sharply. Her eyes widen, her face stiffens, as if she sees something or someone just beyond the frame. In that split second, she doesn't look like a performer on her way to the next big event. She looks terrified. Digital analysts who've reviewed the footage flagged several anomalies. Frames that skip, a low-frequency hum beneath the audio that doesn't match any known aircraft or hangar machinery. Some suggest the video may have been tampered with. Others believe it captured something far more sinister, in real time. But the most unsettling detail? No one can identify the two people walking beside her. They aren't on any manifests. They weren't seen before or after, and neither has come forward. Up next, we follow that shadow even further. A mysterious figure tied to Sydnie's movements for weeks leading up to her disappearance. Someone who wasn't supposed to be there, yet always was. Every rising star draws a crowd. Managers, stylists, publicists, all orbiting the spotlight, hoping to ride the wave of success. But in Sydnie Christmas's case, one figure stood apart. This individual was never named, never photographed, and never officially listed as part of her team. But they were always there. Eyewitnesses say the figure, described as wearing a dark coat, cap pulled low, appeared at multiple events in the weeks leading up to Sydnie's final show. Rehearsals, airports, even private hotel lobbies. Never interacting, never intervening, just observing. Security teams dismissed them at first, until venue surveillance revealed something chilling. This same person was seen slipping through side doors, hovering just out of frame, always departing minutes before or after Sydnie herself. And then they vanished. On the same night Sydnie disappeared, this so-called shadow was seen leaving the venue through a rear loading dock, bypassing all exits under surveillance. No one has seen them since. But the deeper we dig, the stranger it gets. Sources close to Sydnie's management say that just days before her disappearance, she received a handwritten letter left at her dressing room door. There were no fingerprints, no return address, only a single initial signed at the bottom. The contents of that letter have never been made public, but one insider claims Sydnie read it alone, folded it carefully, and said only one thing: they know. What did she mean? Who was they? And was this letter connected to the shadow figure who kept reappearing just outside her reach? Coming up, a phone call, just 33 seconds long, with a warning so blunt and so chilling, it might have predicted the entire tragedy before it ever happened. 2 days before her final performance, Sydnie Christmas received a phone call that would later send shivers through everyone who heard the details. The call lasted exactly 33 seconds. The voice on the other end was distorted, robotic, altered beyond recognition. It wasn't a message of encouragement. It wasn't from a fan. According to someone close to Sydnie, the voice said just 5 words: "Don't take the plane." No explanation, no identity, no way to trace where the call came from. When Sydnie mentioned it later, she brushed it off as a prank. Maybe a crazed fan, she guessed. Maybe someone trying to scare her. But behind closed doors, that call clearly lingered in her mind. Because in the hours leading up to her disappearance, Sydnie's behavior changed dramatically. She stopped responding to messages. She turned off her phone for long stretches. And then she told a friend something startling. She'd been researching alternative routes to the venue. Car services, train tickets, even requests for private security escorts. She was actively planning to avoid flying. But something changed. The very next day, her phone was wiped clean, completely. Photos, texts, chat history, browser logs, gone. A full reset that, according to tech experts, could not have occurred accidentally. It was a deliberate scrub. That same morning, her friends couldn't reach her. Calls went straight to voicemail. One friend received a strange text, just a single line: "I'm going off the grid for a while." Hours later, she was seen walking to the hangar alone. All of this, the deleted phone, the warning call, the sudden shift in behavior, paints a picture that's far from random. But the most disturbing moment was still to come, and it wasn't captured on camera. It was recorded inside the cockpit, on the plane's black box. And what investigators heard next would leave them speechless. When investigators finally recovered the black box from the missing aircraft, no one could have anticipated what they were about to hear. At first, there was nothing. Long, unnerving stretches of pure silence. No radio chatter, no altitude checks, no standard pilot exchanges. Just a low, mechanical hum, and the kind of stillness that makes your skin crawl. Technicians thought it was a malfunction, a corrupted file perhaps, but the equipment was intact. The silence wasn't an error, it was real. And then it started. Faint, barely audible at first, a melody, a slow, drifting tune that didn't belong in any cockpit. Analysts described it as sounding like an old lullaby or maybe a folk song, something distant, nostalgic, and disturbingly out of place. They played it over and over, but no one could identify its source. It was as if the music was leaking in from somewhere else, a room the microphone shouldn't have picked up. Then, just as abruptly as it began, the melody stopped. That's when the voice came in. A whisper right against the microphone, too close, too deliberate. Not Sydnie's voice, not a pilot's, something other. She was never meant to leave. Then static, a harsh, ear-splitting burst that cut the recording off completely. The investigation team froze. What had they just heard? Who had spoken those words? And how could a voice, one unaccounted for, have gotten so close to the aircraft's internal recorder? No additional voices followed, no final transmissions, no sound of impact. Just that chilling phrase echoing in the ears of everyone who heard it. Next, how Sydnie's loved ones reacted when the silence broke, what her family endured in those agonizing hours, and why a longtime friend may hold the final missing piece of the puzzle. While the world scrolled for updates and tabloids raced to print rumors, Sydnie Christmas's loved ones were living a nightmare behind closed doors. In a small, dimly lit living room far from the public eye, her parents, lifelong supporters who never missed a recital, a rehearsal, or a moment of her rise, sat huddled in silence. Grief hung in the air like a fog. They held hands, they waited, and they prayed. Outside, reporters gathered like vultures, cameras flashed, microphones hovered. But inside, time stood still. Sydnie's mother was seen stepping outside briefly, visibly shaken, shielded by family members. She said nothing. Her eyes said everything. But it wasn't just the family grieving in silence. One person, closer to Sydnie than anyone else, was preparing to break hers. Her best friend. A lifelong confidant who had been by Sydnie's side long before the fame, before the press, before the world knew her name. Up to that point, she had refused all interviews, ignored every call, and declined every offer to speak publicly. Until now. Sources close to the investigation confirm she's agreed to speak. And what she's preparing to share may change everything. According to insiders, Sydnie confided in her during the final days. Cryptic messages, late-night phone calls, and one haunting conversation that ended with Sydnie whispering, "If something happens, just remember what I told you." Just when investigators believed they'd exhausted every lead, a final, unexpected discovery shifted everything. A voicemail, long believed to be deleted, found not on Sydnie's phone, but on an old device once used by her personal assistant, buried in a backup folder, untouched until now. The voice in the message was not robotic. It was calm, familiar, but to this day it hasn't been matched to anyone from her known circle. It said only this: "You're running out of time. Don't trust the ones closest to you." The timestamp? Less than 12 hours before Sydnie's disappearance. That revelation opened a floodgate. A torn photograph discovered in a forgotten suitcase, a blurred figure visible in the background of multiple tour snapshots, a diary entry Sydnie wrote weeks before, which read, "They're watching everything, even when I'm alone." Suddenly, the theory shifted. This wasn't about a single bad flight or even a singular threat. It was bigger, coordinated, intentional. According to new whispers from law enforcement insiders, someone had been trying to protect Sydnie all along. Someone embedded within her circle, quietly steering her, warning her, urging her to take a different path. But their efforts were drowned out, labeled paranoia, brushed off as nerves. Now, as pieces of the puzzle finally come into focus, one question looms larger than ever. What if she was never meant to take that flight, and someone tried to stop her? Investigators are re-examining timelines, reconstructing lost data, and following new leads tied to Sydnie's last known communications. But with each clue that surfaces, a darker, more calculated picture begins to form. One that suggests this wasn't just a tragic accident, but the conclusion to a plan set in motion long before that final night. And if that's true, it means the story of Sydnie Christmas isn't over, not by a long shot. The friend is expected to reveal private texts, saved voicemails, and even a final note that Sydnie allegedly handed to her the night before she vanished. What's in that note remains a mystery. But if the whispers are true, it could explain the last-minute route change, the overwhelming fear, and the feeling that someone or something was closing in. But even with all these revelations, we're still missing one crucial piece. And in our final segment, a twist emerges, one no one saw coming. A detail so strange, it could rewrite everything we thought we understood about Sydnie's fate, and who may have tried to stop it.